Thurman Trotman, welcome into the studio, mate. You just told me that you are born ready, so we are ready to go. We are live and we are recording. Mate, good to chat. We've been, conversing a little bit online from afar, obviously. I'm down here in Melbourne. So it's great to finally get the opportunity to have a chat, mate. So welcome aboard and welcome into the
Appreciate it.
studio. Now, for everybody that is watching and listening, let's get a little bit of an insight into Therm, as you are called, or as we can call you. So,
Yeah, yeah,
tell us
yeah,
a little
yeah.
bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'll try to do the abridged version. I do workshops every month where I talk to people about SharePoint, and I'm at the beginning of all of them. I'm always like, "Yo, look, I don't really want to talk about myself. I'm gonna go through this real quick, and then we'll start the workshop." But I'll give it a little bit more time here. So I'm born and raised in the Bronx. You know what I mean? Anybody knows familiar with New York City? I'm from the Bronx, and from the Bronx up until I was 18, I went to the Army. So after turning 18, I joined the Army because all of my friends was doing something with their life and I didn't know what I was doing with my life. And I'm like, yo, what am I going to do? So I joined the Army. And it was in the Army where I really started to hone my computer skills. So I was supposed to be if you ever seen Private Ryan, you remember in Private Ryan, the movie, where right at the beginning, it was going down, it was going crazy. And like somebody reached over and grabbed the soldier's radio. They grabbed the radio and they screamed something on the radio. I was the guy that was supposed to be taking care of those radios. I was supposed to make those radios work, make sure that they're, everything is strapped up, everything ready to go, everything can be used. So I was supposed to be doing that. And I did a little bit of that. But because of the types of units that I went to in the Army, I instead was doing computers. So I remember my first foray with computers, it was like Legos. You know what I mean? Like my NCO, my sergeant, he goes, "Oh yeah, opening computers and fixing them are easy because it's just like Legos." So at that time, I learned about stick of RAM and like a hard drive and all that, and it went in the same place every single time. So I'm just like, "Oh man, this is easy." So we did that for a little bit, but when I came out and I started supporting the government, that's when it was like, okay, now you're going to be doing what was it, network administration. So I'm doing network administration. I eventually, became the guy inside of the shop that did all of the IT because I was working with some people that were, let's just say, a little bit older. So every time that something IT came about, they was like, "Oh yeah, just give it to Thurman, let him do it." So after that, that's how SharePoint came into my life because around 2009, when we were still using SharePoint 2007, I'm supporting the office and the government. SharePoint comes on board and they're like, "Yeah, let Thurman do it. Thurman go to training. Thurman do this, Thurman do that." So that's how, I learned about SharePoint, fell in love with it. And that was 2009. And I've been knee deep ever since. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
So that's like my life combined with SharePoint. So,
Yeah, well, it's a lot of people that end up in SharePoint are kind of thrown that. I mean, that a lot
yes.
of times people start out as a general network person. I mean, I'm exactly the same. I mean, I started out as an IT support, and then into network administration, and then all of a sudden you get lumped with this thing called SharePoint. And you're
Yeah.
tasked with sort of, trying to understand it and then, try and make it
Training
work
on it, all of
for
that.
yeah, that's exactly right, exactly right. So, how do you think that's changed? You're obviously doing a lot in the SharePoint space now. I mean, the content that you're posting out on LinkedIn and other social networks as well. You're doing. Is that your sole focus at the moment? So you just SharePoint stuff?
Oh yeah, that's it. All day, every day. Matter of fact, so I have a small business that I'm trying to grow.
Mm.
Excuse me. That does my small business does SharePoint development, consulting, and training.
Yep.
Development and consulting I've been doing, like I said, ever since 2009. I've been doing that ever since. But I started my small business in 2019. I took it like on the side. I was like, part timing for another organization, like moonlighting. And yeah, 2019. And that's what I was doing, development and consulting. But around 2021, I jumped ship from my regular job and I went full time with my small business. But again, it's development and consulting. It wasn't until the top of 2023, kind of like the bottom of 2022, where I was like, I want to create this training portion where I go all in with training. You know what I mean? And I called it the SharePoint Help Desk. The point of the training was so I do the consulting, I do the development, and I do some training too. I was doing some training with those organizations, but intentionally creating a portion of my business that is all about training. That's where the SharePoint Help Desk came from. And the whole concept was like, yo, what Microsoft did was turn SharePoint into an end user's tool. So now I'm like, okay, well, since it's an end user's tool and you have removed the whole permission and access and special person needs, you know what I mean? Now it's just for regular people, the same way they use PowerPoint, the same way they use Excel. So let me jump in there and train you on how to use this tool that Microsoft just released to you that you don't even know exists. A lot of people don't even know this. The SharePoint is inside of the suite. And a lot of people, if they do know about it, they probably hate it because a lot of people in organizations hate SharePoint.
Well, a lot of people, I'll find that as well. I mean, a lot of people have come from the old style SharePoint, so 2007 and all of those sort of things. And it does have a little bit of a stigma around it if people have used it before. Oh, we're moving to an organization, or we're now implementing SharePoint again. Whereas, people that are new into SharePoint don't really know the sort of the backstory and anything like that. So
I like those people. I like the new people.
Yeah, well, that's right. It's an interesting, I guess, an interesting analogy that I haven't really heard before about. You mentioned that you sort of treat it like another application, so like Word or PowerPoint or something like that.
Yes,
and I think that SharePoint traditionally, when people are, I guess, implementing it, really do just use it as a file repository, right? So they're moving from a file share or something like that, and they're just moving files from this place to that place. And they don't really understand all the other bits and pieces that come with a SharePoint site. So do you find that side of things, how do you approach that with organizations and individuals, I guess, around, making them aware of the different aspects? SharePoint's not just a document management system, but you do have lists and pages and news and all of this other stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Education. I'm telling you, before, like, to my point about it being like where you had to reach out to somebody like me or you, right? If you were inside of an organization and you needed something done on SharePoint, you had to reach out to me or you or the other folks in the world who knew about SharePoint. But that was because of permissions. It wasn't that you could just go spin up your own SharePoint site, start working on it, and then you're like, man, I'm stuck. I need some help. Not for most organizations. It was, hey, before you create a site, before you create a list, before you create a library, before you do anything, you have to reach out to somebody who actually knows how to do it. What Microsoft did was change that by putting it making it a tool in the suite, the same way they make all these other tools in the suite. So cool. That's fine. They did that. But you need education. Like, you need tons and tons of education between you and that application, because you're giving an end user so much power. For instance, let's say, like, I remember the organization I was working at when I was an employee. Teams bombarded the organization because of COVID, right? And it's just spinning up really quick and everybody's using it. But people didn't know that you could go to Teams, create a team, put your documents in there, start using it. And if you don't create that and configure that properly, the whole entire organization has access to your team, and it can see all those documents you put in there. So to me, it's not about, hey, stop doing that, you can't do that. It's more so, hey, this is what happens when you do that. Here's the proper way to do it. In other words, education, as opposed to pulling the plug and saying you can't create a team anymore. But that's what was happening, is that people were using these tools like they use Excel, but one of the biggest pieces is permission. You know what I'm saying? Exposing things like PII and that type of stuff to other people. Because if you spin up a spreadsheet or a PowerPoint, it's just you. At one point, it was just you that's using that thing, and whoever else you email it to or wherever you upload it on the shared drive that other people have access to, that's the people who have access to it. But if you go on SharePoint or Teams and you start putting things up there and it's public, damn near anybody can find it by short search or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So you got to be careful of those types of things. And to me, again, it's education. If I'm talking to an organization, my thought process is always education. How can I teach you about this tool without being all technical? I just talk to you like a person. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's how people resonate with that. So that's my goal.
Yeah, I think that's important because a lot of organisations get a little bit scared, I guess, in allowing users to have that much flexibility and power and that type of thing to
Hmm.
create teams and sites and upload documents and do all that sort of stuff. And they do try and control that and lock a lot of things down, which in some cases needs to be done, but in a lot of
Yep,
cases,
it does.
um, if education was at the forefront, then people do know what the implications are about what they're doing. Now, if things are locked down too much, then you probably find as well that they might just go and say, "Well, this is just all too hard. Let's go and use another service, and we'll just pop our
Exactly.
documents over there, and we'll collaborate over there." And then
Yep.
you lose that governance and security and everything that Microsoft 365 gives you as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Now, you focus a lot and you do a lot of work around, and I've seen a lot of your content around project management or running and using SharePoint and Microsoft 365 more broadly in the realm of managing projects.
Hmm.
So tell me a little bit about some different approaches that you use and that you implement with the people that you're working with around managing projects in SharePoint, because there's lots of different ways in which you can do it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I will say it does depend on the customer. But if you are, if you follow my LinkedIn feed, then you see I talk about all different types of angles, but the goal is always like educating on SharePoint. So if you think about the big chunks, the big pieces of SharePoint, SharePoint sites, SharePoint libraries, SharePoint lists. Those are the big chunks, right? But we all know that SharePoint could do a million things. But there's no need for a project manager to know all of the million things it can do. You just need to know that it can help. That's the very first thing. And then if I keep the conversation very broad, like, hey, you should have a site, or here's what a list could do, or if you're managing documents, here's what you could do. That's my approach. But the one that I lean into the most is talking about a site, because I don't like being that guy that's like, look, SharePoint can solve all your problems. It can't. You know what I'm saying? It's not going to be the end all be all. But a site, a central location to put everything that you are working on in one area, I'm a big believer in that. I don't care what your project is. And if you don't use a SharePoint site, fine. Just find a place to put all of your things in one area. I just happen to think that SharePoint is a really good place to put it, because let's say, for instance, you are on a new project and you think I have to put all of my documents in one area. So yeah, you're probably thinking Google Drive. All right, that's fine. Throw all your documents in Google Drive. But I would challenge you and say, listen, SharePoint has this thing called a document library, which is just like Google Drive. And that's just one piece. So take all your documents and put them inside of this library. But guess what? Other things that you're tracking that don't necessarily go inside of a document, they can go inside of these lists. Other things that are third party, you can put links to them on your site. Just imagine if you have an external site, what you would be providing for people on that external site. You can do the same exact thing on your internal site. That's just for you and the people using your project. So I always like to start with a site, because that's one of the workshops that I do frequently. Is talking about a site, because from the site we can start to branch off and talk about everything else: documents,
So, so
lists,
you would
information, whatever.
you would promote the use of a SharePoint site to run a project, as opposed to, say, I've seen and have built actually different types of processes and project management type of solutions where we're using a document library and maybe a document set for each particular project. But what you've outlined there is, a really good, and you've articulated it really, really well, of the benefits of using a SharePoint site because of all of this other stuff. You've got
Mm-hmm.
your lists, you've got issue registers, you've got all of that sort of stuff that you can use.
Right.
Now, a common question also, and I'm sure you get asked this as well, is, well, does that mean that we're going to have 500 or 600 SharePoint sites as opposed to a document library with that amount of document sets? How do you
I
tackle
mean,
that?
if you have 500 or 600 projects, I would be curious to see what those 500 to 600 projects are. You know what I'm saying? But I do believe, just like how you would spin up which, matter of fact, let me clarify that, because I was on a show the other day and I didn't clarify. I recommend you as an end user go and open up a team and start using that team, my Microsoft team, for your project. It's a great way for an end user to just get started. It's not difficult, low barrier entry. And when you flick it on, you start just chatting. People know how to chat. So you use the post section to communicate. When you create that team, you automatically get a SharePoint site connected to it. So use that site. That's the site that I'm talking about when I say use your SharePoint site to collaborate, because you're automatically going to get it when you create a team. And that's the way that I use it. I don't mean just go start creating SharePoint sites, create a team and use the corresponding site.
Right.
Now,
So you push for the team, sort of the team's first approach as well.
yes, yeah, 1000%. Because, and I know you're familiar with Ami Diamond. I had Ami on my show because he heard me put out a show that said something like things you need to worry about with SharePoint. And one of my things was, it's not as user friendly as us in the SharePoint world think, because what Teams is what they wanted SharePoint to be. Teams literally is user friendly. You can send somebody to Teams, send somebody to SharePoint, and the person who goes to Team, in my opinion, will be up and running and working faster than the person in SharePoint. I just want you to be able to get to your work. I don't want to make you some like a SharePoint developer or SME or some Teams expert. I just want you to be able to work. So just like when you're using Slack, just get in there and start working. I'm not trying to teach you how to, build things. Not yet, anyway. If you want to scratch that itch, we could do that. But get to work, and I'm pretty sure that person in Teams is going to get to work first.
Yep.
So I do take a Teams approach first. I'm like,
Yep.
Go there to get your project going. So to answer your question, yes, a project for every project have a site that comes with a team.
Or a team. So a team per project. Cool. So
Yes.
All right, step one, takeaway, team per project. Now,
Absolutely.
what about your thoughts around channel provisioning channels and the creation of channels for projects? Do you think just a general channel's the best approach, or a project could potentially have different streams, right? So that would mean that a channel per stream or things like that would make sense. What are your thoughts around, and how do you approach the creation of channels or the setup of that Microsoft team?
Yeah, so I had more focused thoughts on that when I was supporting an organization that used a lot of channels and wanted to use Teams and all that. Now I'm kind of flexible. If you think about what happens when you create a new channel, you got to really think, like, do you need that for your project? Do you need a whole nother library with a whole nother chat area with, if you make it private, a whole nother site? Like, do you need all of that in your project? If you really truly believe you need that to separate the thread of comments and to have a separate library, then we could talk about it. I'm not gonna argue you down as your consultant and tell you no, that's not the way to go. I don't have a hard and fast on that one. It really just depends on the project. But I believe that with your general channel and that team and all the things that you get with that corresponding site, you can get a lot of work knocked out, like a lot. You can cover a lot of ground. I'm not gonna steer you away from taking that, from making a bunch of channels, but I would, if I'm sitting down with you and I'm hearing about your project, I'd like to know why you think you might need some more channels. So nothing, I'm not concrete on either way. What about you? You got some thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I like to, again, it kind of it is an it depends type of thing. So depending on the size of the project, right? So if you've got different streams, and let's say you've got different people working on the project, obviously with different across different areas of the business, there might be a need for a design team. There might be 2 or 3 people on that design team to have their own channel where they're talking about and conversing around the design portion or stream of that project. They've got their files in their files tab, which is obviously just a folder inside of the shared document library.
Yep.
So that it kind of keeps that separate for just that group of people. I think also what helps from a communication point of view inside of teams is the use of tags. So I'm not sure if you gone down that path with communication in
yet.
teams. So being able to group different people with tags so that not everybody is getting bombarded with all the communication that's part of that project. So that's another good approach. But if it's a smaller type of project, then a general channel's generally enough for running that. And you're right, you do have that, the central location for all the files. You've got your conversations in there.
Mm-hmm.
Always another key point around project management is obviously tasks. So what's your approach for task management across projects then? If we're talking about teams, we're talking about a team per project. We've got our SharePoint site. What about tasks?
So I'm a big fan of Planner, right? Mm-hmm. But I always tell people when I recommend Planner that until further notice, the biggest problem I have with Planner is that you can delete something and that's the end of that. You know what I'm saying? There's no recovery in a recycle bin or nothing like that. That's a big deal to me. It's just mind blowing to me that you can do something like that and not be able to recover it. Especially, this isn't like Microsoft is not some company that just started 6 months ago and they don't know the benefit of having a recycle bin. This is a billion-year-old company and they have a tool out there with task management where people are going to be collaborating and using this tool where you can delete that item, you can delete a task and everything that was on that task goes away with it and there's no way to recover it. I don't even think there's a way to tell Power Automate, hey, if somebody deletes a task, capture this information and tell me that they deleted it. Last I checked anyway. So I love everything about Planner, but there's that. And then also I know Planner's getting ready to get a facelift if it didn't already happen. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm a big fan of Planner, but I always tell people, this is a thing. But I also let them know you can use a SharePoint list. So here's my thing about SharePoint lists. I love SharePoint lists because it's a way for you to build in your own image. So maybe you see Planner and you think, nah, that's not good enough. I don't like that. Or you use to-dos and you're like, no, that's not good enough. Here's what I want to track on my tasks. Go build it on a SharePoint list. And if the juice is worth the squeeze, then do it, knock it out. You're good to go. But most of the time, I think Planner will handle your business. But it's just that whole delete thing. That's a big problem to me. So, task management inside of the tool is going to be Planner. I'm going to tell you to use Planner or customize your own SharePoint list.
Yeah. Interesting.
Those are my recommendations.
Yeah. So as a project manager then, what do you see as the key benefits of if I'm managing a project, what are the benefits of me using a Microsoft team?
So the very first thing, like I said, the reason why I recommend sites is because everything is in one location. It is so easy to get started and start emailing things. You know what I mean? You start emailing documents. You're excited to start your project. You're telling everybody, hey, check this out. We're going to do this and do this. Here's a link to the stakeholder register. Not a link. I'm sorry. Here's a email. I'm going to blast the whole team and tell everybody, here's the stakeholder manager register or stakeholder register. It's a spreadsheet. Maybe it's a stakeholder register. It's another project management document and another one. And you got 10 people on your team. As soon as you put those in attachments and send them out to your team, you have just made 10 copies of that document as soon as it leaves your inbox. So you may think you're doing something good by sending everybody the direct documents, but you're not. You're making copies of the documents, which essentially makes different versions. So the first thing you need to do is get that team spun up, put documents inside of that library, and then send people the link to whatever you need to send them a link to a document, a link to the team, or a link to whatever else you got going on. Links. We wanted to use links, just like we use the internet. If I wanted to show you something on social media and I sent you a message, I'm going to send you a link. There's no way for me to go download a funny video. Well, there is, but why would I go download a funny video and send you that video? That doesn't make any sense. I'll just send you the link to that video. And you can get to that however you want to, whenever you want to, by just going to that same link. So I'm a big proponent of that because everything is in the same location. And then when there are updates, when there are changes, it doesn't matter. You're going to one location. All of the changes are going to happen in one location. The same thing with like LinkedIn. Me and you are on LinkedIn pretty frequently. If LinkedIn has something that we need to do, we're not taking a spreadsheet and then sending it to LinkedIn and hoping that they do the thing. We're going to go to LinkedIn and do something on LinkedIn to make it happen. So treat your site like it's LinkedIn. Use your team and treat your team like, yeah, listen, this is where we do everything. Any and everything is going to happen on LinkedIn. Not LinkedIn, on Teams. Sorry.
So, what about? I mean, what about the other aspects of SharePoint? So, if we're in Microsoft Teams, what are your other tips or best practices? I guess around. Are you using SharePoint pages, or when you're running a project? It's obviously more than just document management and task management. There might be updates or meetings or things like that. Do you find that users that are part of the project are starting to use other aspects of the SharePoint site inside of Teams as well?
Yeah, see, so I don't know because my business is still young. I would say was that 4 years now. So my business is still young, and in the training portion where I do a whole lot of promotion online, that's about a year old. My time inside of an organization, dealing with a bunch of stakeholders inside the organization, I found that they need the basics. It's those folks who dig in and really care about getting this project done and see the potential in the tool that need further help, which means now we can start getting crazy and I start showing you all the cool tools and tips, all the cool tips and features that you could do with SharePoint. But for the most part, it's so hard for me to explain to people how Microsoft has this suite of a bunch of applications. And inside of this suite, there's one tool called SharePoint. And this one tool has a ton of features out of the box. We're not even talking about before you start customizing it. Out of the box, this one tool inside of this whole suite has all these features that allow you to get so much done. It's like kind of crazy that you pay the amount you pay for something that's so powerful. So a lot of times, well, so far in my dealing with people outside of when I used to be an employee at an organization, I said that when I start promoting online, I'm going to start promoting all the basics. And once you come to me and we do some training or I show you what's really going on, then we can take it past the basics. But the basics are getting so much done. You know what I'm saying? That I got to sharpen my skills a little bit. You know what I'm saying? I'm losing some of my skills because I ain't been touching up on the advanced stuff. So yeah, outside of all the things you could do with a list, all the things you could do with libraries, all the things you could do with sites, those things are so extensive out of the box that you can get a lot done with your project before you even, like you talked about document sets. Document sets are super powerful, but I'm like, before I even take you to document sets, you should see what you can do with just a basic SharePoint library. You know what I'm saying? And some metadata and how you could use views and how you could use links on those views and all this other stuff. And then, hey, guess what? There's a thing called document sets that will blow your mind. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just like, I haven't had to go deep yet with any of these new customers that I'm gaining. So, but out of the box, it's just so much. You get so much.
Yeah. And are there any what do you find about the common pain points that people have, I guess? Are there any challenges, people using SharePoint or Teams for the first time? Where are people getting caught up? Is the adoption in the organizations that you work with, how is that going? I mean, does Teams make it easier from an adoption point of view, do you think?
Yes, because Teams to me is more user-friendly for an end user. But I think across the board, right? Technology will technology. It's going to work most of the time, but a lot of times there'll be some quirks that'll make you want to punch yourself in the face. It's like, how did they not think of this? Or why does this do that? You know what I'm saying? Stuff like that. If I can get in between the technology and the person, I'm pretty good at just saying, listen, that's a limitation. Or here's what you're going to have to do to get over that hump. because to me, it's not about technology. I should have mentioned this a long time ago. To me, all the technology in the world is great. It's cool. You know what I'm saying? I love it. I'm knee deep in it. But it's more about people. To me, a challenge is always going to be people. So there's a lot of tools out there and a lot of technologies that can do the things that Microsoft the suite can do, Salesforce and all these other ones. They can do really good things, but they're going to have some limitations. They're going to have some quirks. They're going to have some things that's just like it doesn't quite scratch that itch. But if I can get in front of the technology and let them know, all right, it can't do this, but here are some alternatives. And if not, then we need to graduate into maybe Power Apps or Power Automate or whatever for a workflow. And if not that, then we need to take it to the next step. So not a SharePoint list, but maybe we have to use a Dataverse or whatever it is. We have ways to work around it. It's more so not that the technology can't do a thing, but that there's a person at the organization who's averse to change. And they're like, yo, I don't care how cool this tool is. We used to do this like this all the time. So I don't want to do this new way. That to me is way much more of a problem for me and for people working at an organization than the technology. The technology will figure it out. It's not a problem.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think starting with the end or the outcome that somebody's trying to get will then align. You're able to align which path or which technology or which service or application you actually use to get to that outcome. I mean, we all know that SharePoint, you can do a million things with SharePoint, but just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? Or
exactly.
whether it's we need a form. Well, yes, Power Apps can actually build you a form, but do you really need that? I mean, it's really understanding from a non-technical point of view what the customer or what the person is trying to achieve, and then working out the right solution for that as well. I think is probably key. Yeah. No,
and even though I'm a Microsoft guy, but if I'm at your organization,
don't you call yourself Mr. SharePoint or something?
Mr. SharePoint.
Mr. SharePoint with some sunnies or something like
that. Yeah. I was actually, I was in some audio rooms in LinkedIn talking about what I do, and they're like, "Hey, you should call yourself Mr. SharePoint, Mr. SharePoint." And I'm like, "Man, I can't do that. That's crazy." I know a bunch of people that run circles around me when it comes to SharePoint, and they're like, "No, that's not the point. You just it's for branding, this, that, and the third." And I'm like, "All right, fine, I'll do it." And I was very hesitant, and then I finally did it. And then when I did it, I recognized, oh yeah, this is good for branding. It's very easy, to just put Mr. SharePoint under my name.
Well, it is. Well, I talk about this a lot, and when you're working in this space, you tend to take a lot of what we do for granted, right? So simple things you mentioned, not emailing attachments, and it might sound extremely simple to us and for a lot of people, but there's still a lot of people that just need that basic understanding of the fundamentals of SharePoint, how to share a link, how to share it properly and securely, as opposed to just attaching it to an email and sending it out. So
absolutely,
a lot of stuff that you talk about, that I talk about, that the whole sort of industry talks about, I guess gets lost a little bit, and we do take a lot of that sort of stuff for granted. So
yeah, you're right. I forgot. So matter of fact, when I got really frequent on LinkedIn, I was like, yeah, I'm going to keep this very low level because I want people to understand what I'm doing here. I don't want to be too over their heads. But then as I posted, I realized I'm not low enough. Like if I thought that I was posting here, which is pretty down here, I have to post and realize I need to be down here. Where am I at? I need to be down here. You know what I'm saying? Because, and that's not like an insult to the folks using it. It's like, yo, all of that stuff, they don't care about yet. It's not important yet. What they need to know is just they can do their jobs better with this tool that they're already paying for, highly likely, if you work at an organization that pays for Microsoft. So yeah, you're right. I thought I wasn't taking what I did for granted until I posted more, got more feedback, and I realized, you know what? I need to strip this down even more. And it's been great. It's like endless content, by the way. Freaking love it.
Yeah. Well, as we wrap things up now, it's a very interesting story. You've come from, interesting background and all of that sort of stuff. So I appreciate you jumping on and sharing all of that as well. Now, for people that are wanting to follow you and get in contact with you or anything like that, where's the best place for people to find you?
LinkedIn. I am on LinkedIn each and every single day. Matter of fact, if I'm not on LinkedIn, I'm dead. That's the only reason I'm not going to be there. So within 24 hours, if you send me a message on LinkedIn, I'll get back to you because I'm there every single day. So I'm all over the place, but I'm not going to tell you about all of this.
So everybody watching, everybody that's just heard that, we've all heard it within 24 hours. So everybody jump on LinkedIn right now, message within 24 hours, we'll get back to you straight away.
I'll tell you what, it's becoming difficult is as my followers grow and people connect with me, I was like, I'm going to do this thing where like, it doesn't matter who connects with me. If I connect with them, I'm going to send them a personal message and be like, hey, what's up? Thanks for connecting. I'm still doing it. But as the amount of people, it becomes like too much, I might have to hang that up here soon because if too many people are following me, I can't just sit on LinkedIn all day talking about, thanks for following. So I don't know. For right now, if you contact me, I'm going to still reach out. I'm going to say what's up within 24 hours. But, that's for now.
Very good. I'll post all that in the show notes as well. Now, what about these Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles I can see behind you on your bookshelf? What's going on there?
I got it for Christmas. Yeah. Those are my guys, man. Where am I at? Hold on. Where am I at? Yeah, right here. My son set them up for me. Mikey, Donnie, Leo, and Raph. So he's like, yo, Daddy, let me post them for you. Let me set them up in their fighting pose or whatever. I'm like, go ahead, bro. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, this is just part of my whole setup here. I got a ton of things going on back here.
Very good, mate. Very good. Well, it's been great chatting, mate. So thanks for jumping in, and we'll have to do this again.
Absolutely.
At another stage. So thanks again, mate.
Yeah. No, Daniel, real quick, my fault. I have to say thank you. You know what I mean? Because I know you got this platform here, and I remember years ago, I came across one of your videos. If you're a SharePoint person, you know what Google is. You go to Google when you run into an issue. You know what I'm saying? And there's a lot of people in the space who you would run into. So like all the old school guys. You know what I'm saying? Laura Rogers or Greg. You know what I mean? Like all the people. You're one of them. I remember a long time ago running into your stuff. I was using your videos. I'm pretty sure I clicked thumbs up or left a comment and said thanks. And for a while, I hadn't seen you. Like, I guess YouTube wasn't like pushing you up where you needed to be. Then I got on LinkedIn and I started seeing your stuff more frequently. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. Daniel. I was like, where's he been? You know what I'm saying? But it's because your YouTube stuff got suppressed on my channel, on my like my personal YouTube, like, when I would search for those things. But now I have my business YouTube. And I subscribe to you now, so I don't. It doesn't matter. I remember back then, I'd be going through everybody's stuff, clicking like, and then not subscribing. So that's why I wasn't like able to keep up with your stuff. But I gotta say thank you for all you're doing for the space. You know what I mean? For inviting me onto your show, for having the other guests that you have on the show, and putting out that good information. I really, 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 really appreciate it. I'm very humbled by you. You asked me to come up here and do this interview. So thank you.
I mean, as I said, I've been watching you for a while, and your story's very interesting, where you've come from and what you're doing now, and the impact that SharePoint and the M365 space has had on where you've ended up and where you're going in the future. So it's a good story.
Appreciate that, man. Appreciate that. Thank you.
No worries. Okay.
All right, good deal.